Hello, my friend, and welcome to Security, hosted by me, Johnny Seifert. This is a celebrity mental health podcast where I say it's okay to not be okay. And if you have the same mantra as me, whether you're watching or listening, leave a 5-star rating, click that subscribe button, and leave a review. And let's keep spreading the word. It's okay to not be okay. Now, let me tell you about my guest today. My guest today marks her annual trip to Security Towers, where each summer she joins me to take a look halfway through the year to check in on your mental health. Her true crime tour, The Serial Killer Next Door, continues until November, and motherhood is keeping her busy with her new baby. So it's an honour she has found some time with, thanks to AO, to join me on Skin and Skit. It's my dear friend, it's my inspiration, it's my mentor, it's Emma Kenny. Hello, Emma.
Oh, what a lovely introduction. It's always a joy to speak to you.
Well, I mean, you are the busiest person in the world, touring, motherhood, YouTubing. I don't know where you find the time, so I'm so honoured to have you today.
Oh, I'll always give you my time. I think our journey begins quite a long time ago. I think we've been through some real ups and downs in the last 5, 6 years, and both of us have had a meeting of minds over that. And if you can't make time for people who've inspired you and connected with you and spent time with you during the good and bad times, what can you do? It's as simple as that. When you talk about it's okay not to be okay, I think that part of that comes down to it's also okay to acknowledge that life sometimes is full of struggles, and the people that make it okay are the people who share that space, even when it is difficult. So, total brilliant introduction to an absolute connection in our mindset.
But also, everything happens for a reason. And when we've had those lows, and you and I have both had many lows over the past
Yeah.
6 years, as you say, and we've discussed it privately, and then we've watched each other have a flip and then grow again. And so, for
Yeah.
example, we'll talk what's in the public domain. Obviously, you did this morning and everything that came out about COVID and yada, yada, yada. You then went backwards and you had financial issues and you had
Yeah.
home issues and you had career issues. That happens. We spoke through it. And then you turn to the next year and your YouTube blows up. And then you're going on tour and everything like that. And you're like, well, hold on a minute. Yes, I've gone through the ups and downs, but I was Emma Kenny psychologist, Emma Kenny TV presenter. Now I'm Emma Kenny tour, Emma Kenny YouTuber. And you've completely changed your sense of belonging and the actual responsibility you're bringing to the world.
Do you know what's funny though? When you actually draw back and you analyze it, and I'm a real analyzer, you can't have spent 20 years working as psychological therapist without having that ability. If you're a good therapist, you're a good analyzer. And that has good points and bad points, because people will be listening to this and they won't be qualified, but that doesn't matter. Can't create a therapist. You're just born it, if that makes you either are somebody empathic and analytic or you're not. And there'll be lots of people who've never had a qualification in this field who completely connect with me. You go through the process of exploring every avenue of your mindset and thinking from different vantage points and structuring responses to situations you're going through, good and bad. And that's always been who I was from day one. So when I drew back and I looked at what happened over the years, from dad killing himself, obviously being the origin, I would say, of a big change in my life, because you can't go through that without a big change. It transitions who you are. And then COVID hitting pretty immediately afterwards, and me just having a very clear perspective of what's right and wrong, which is you don't lock children up with predators. It's as simple as that. No matter what your fear, what your ideas about right and wrong, that is just ultimately wrong. And having to kind of stand in my truth and feeling like, oh my God, this is so terrifying. Everything that I knew is slipping away. All of the things that I've built feel like they're crumbling, but I have to do this anyway. And then, yes, like you said, the change, reframing, recharging, and the gratitude of really recognizing that you can feel like the world's canceling you. But what you can't ultimately do is cancel you in people's minds. So whilst my career has transitioned, although I'm doing lots of television series now, and I'm back doing what I was doing before, along with all of the most incredible opportunities online with my digital work and making my own films, what I've realized is you can do as much as you like out there, cancelling people or saying nasty things about them. But the average human being, which is what we see in the UK, in the world, the normal, typical human being has got a huge amount of love in their heart, a huge amount of empathy, and they like you, even when you've done things that they agree with, disagree with, they like you. So actually, fundamentally, I suppose the stability and foundation was the people who cared enough about me and followed me for years and accept that it's okay to disagree and agree and all of those things in between. And they were the ones who cradled me. So whether I'm on mainstream being followed or on Facebook being followed or on YouTube being followed or on Twitter being followed, it's those people that really made my life the way it is. So ultimately, whilst I've rebranded, reframed and recalibrated and changed the way that I operate in my content, the only thing that matters is the people coming to view it. And they stayed with me. And I think fundamentally, when we're going through crises, and you talk about this a lot in mental health, because life has got lots of suffering associated with it. It's the most beautiful part of our experience when we acknowledge that it doesn't always have to be good, but it's still worthwhile. And when you kind of draw back and go, you think that you are a certain person on a certain route, on a certain journey, and you believe that ultimately there is a door that says open or closed. Because we're brought up very much to believe that, you know, from day one, people go through the school system. I was dyslexic, I'm dyscalculic, dyspraxic. I also have a tic disorder, which means that I tic sometimes if I'm anxious because I physicalize my anxiety. And I've always put that to the side. That's not really something that I've found defines me in any way. You know, I'm a quirky oddball, and I love that about myself. I like being a unique human. You know, there is something about that journey that I've always found really beautiful. But it meant that when I was younger, I didn't find things quite easy, particularly at school, for example, because it's very much a system where you're good or bad, where you succeed or fail. And being defined that way early on means that you kind of do get these ideas in your brain that says somebody has to open a door for me or somebody has to close a door for me. And I either get through it or I don't, I succeed or I fail. And ultimately, as I've grown on this journey, and also age is part of that definer, I've realized that that's just a myth. It's just an absolute myth. So when you're thinking that the world is crumbling because ultimately somebody says this is right or this is wrong, you fail to see that that's more a reaction to a condition you've been programmed with from day one, which is this is the right way, this is the wrong way, there's nowhere in between. And then fundamentally, the earlier you come to the conclusion, life's just a massive gray area and nobody really knows what they're doing. But what people do know is authenticity. And what people do know is if you genuinely stick to your guns being the human that you are, so that they always know that they can count on you still being the same today as you were yesterday. Even when you go through changes, the foundation of you is that's what sticks. And that lesson is probably the most powerful lesson I've had in ridiculous amounts of decades, that fundamental lesson. And that's what's carried me through. And I think brought me this new opportunity, which all begins with the belief that people who are good will still find good in you, even when it's not necessarily been projected that way, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And my friend Mark Wogan, who hosts the Spinning with Mark Wogan podcast, said we are all a work in progress. And if we utilize what you've just said, and we are all a work in progress till the day we die, it's that thing of I've always, and you know this, I've always thought I need to be perfect. I need to be the best. And I'm looking for that perfection. And it's taken time and therapy going, well, actually, I am allowed to make mistakes. As long as I'm authentic to myself, as long as I'm doing what I feel is right for me, that's okay. And if we talk on the most basic level, let's say relationships, and you know, you're being a little bit too keen, if that's what you are, absolutely fine. Someone will accept that. Someone will want that. Other people don't. And I think thinking that we're all a work in progress, but going, look, if that's what I did yesterday and I can look back today and say, that was me, that's fine. And you've done exactly that. And I think, you know, the gravitas you give as a psychologist, the gravitas that you've got, whether it is the mainstream media or the online media, all of that is still authentic to you. And yes, you've had a bit of a break from TV, but as you say, you've come back to mainstream TV. And it means also there's been a break for the bosses, but the audience have stayed with you. And actually, it's the audience that matter more than the executives. And just really quickly, I was listening to the This Is the Entertainment podcast of Richard Osman, and he was saying how the Euros define ITV shares for the whole year. So if England are in the final, that defines ITV. So what happened with Philip Schofield, for example, doesn't make a difference. It's nothing. It's that. And same with you going, it's not, no one cares about what you did, what you didn't say. No one cares about that. They care because they've bought into you. It's just one or two executives at the top who have suddenly got a little bit of an issue. But why are we caring about two people when there's 2 gazillion people who love you for what you do?
Yeah, I think as well that also demonstrates the interplay of fear. And I think these days that people don't realize that when you're afraid, it's not to stay afraid. You're being taught courage. It's a real promoter. It's an activator of the next required movement. So essentially, it tells you what needs to happen next. So when people in positions that are really big get scared, usually they will run from it. They will hide from it. They will avoid it. They will deny it. They will react to it in a negative way. Whereas I'm all about, oh, that feels scary. Why does that feel scary? Oh, maybe I'm going to say it because that feels really scary. And I'll have difficult conversations. I was on a call yesterday because just about to do just a two-parter documentary. And there's some real nuances in it that people don't want to talk about. And I'm like, that's when we talk about it, because that's when you find, first of all, commonalities. Lots of people feel that fear. And that's where you find bravery, because some people are brave enough to say things that other people are going to struggle to hear. And that's where we find promotion of change, because then we all can talk about that, challenge it, and figure out where most people feel on it. And so for me, the last 2 years have been terrifying, both in loss and grief, and incredibly powerful and incredibly beautiful. And I see the world in such a different way. And that's really nice to be in my middle age and to see that I'm literally at the beginning. I'm right at the origin of who I am. Like you said about self-actualization. So, you know, the art of therapeutic dynamics and understanding and promotion and growth is self-actualization, truly getting to know who you are. And I think I've spent my life just going, I know who I am. Oh, who am I? I know who I am. Oh, who am I? You know, that kind of feeling of, oh, I thought I knew myself and I thought I understood myself, but actually I've changed so much. And even my views in humanity and what I believe the world is about, that's all shifted and changed. So yeah, fear, I think, is something now I understand and have empathy for. So as opposed to feeling anger, which I think is really easy because it's a reaction to everything, isn't it? It's a shadow emotion. I feel angry when I'm humiliated. I feel angry when I'm not taken for value. I feel angry when somebody lets me down. Actually, that's not anger. It's just me not wanting to feel what I really feel, which is hurt or frustrated. It's an easier reaction to it. And now I see how people react to fear. I also feel more empathy towards it. So I don't feel angry with any of those people who, in a knee-jerk reaction, wanted to label me things that were entirely untrue. But if they needed to do that in that moment, I don't think that was anything to do with me. It was everything to do with them. And that's for them to manage and them to process. But I have an empathy and compassion for it that's different than I would have had 10 years ago, where I was very rigid. I just thought, you're wrong. Stop doing that. That's hurtful. Whereas now I think everyone's doing the best. Most of the time, they don't realize that their impact could be negative, even when they're doing things that seem grossly negative. And when you understand that and recognize that if you were sat with them in a cafe in the cold light of day talking about this issue, you'd probably agree on most things. There'd be some things you differentiate about. But for the most part, that's what human beings are. So the gray area has become so present for me in life these days. And like you said, money is an important thing in a capitalist world where materialism counts. You know, we have so many blessings in our modern age in the UK. I mean, massive blessings, really. Even when we're in our worst state, we have massive blessings, right? And I think that, again, that appreciation more and more and more, as opposed to the things that have destabilized me, making me bitter. What has destabilized me has made me feel really grateful, really grateful. And what you said about that game in dating, because I think that dating ultimately is probably one of the most challenging things for the under 35s right now. Love is very challenging for the under 35s. And I think that that game idea of, how am I meant to play this? What am I meant to do when I meet somebody ultimately that I really like? And that classic, oh, are you being a bit too needy, being a bit too desperate? For me, that's bravery. Human being who bears all, human being who doesn't want to play the game and go, oh, are we chatting? When are we going to actually start dating? Then when are we actually going to be in a relationship? Somebody wants a shortcut and say, I'm not in that space. I want to just have a relationship and chance love. That's far braver and brighter than it is to just carry on those games that make people, I don't know, a little bit tired and exhausted and lackluster in that area in the end. So I would say that what you do in relationships, because I know that you will be all in, it's brave. And more people should be brave.
Well, it's vulnerable, and it's putting yourself out there and going, look, I've been rejected many times. I'm going to do this, but also there's a lot of hurt that's come of it. And there's a lot of
Sure.
boundaries that are being built up. And also, because there are certain triggers, I don't want to have to go through what I've been before. So either tell me straight or don't. You mention everything to do with change and the way you look at yourself and the way you were 10 years ago to now. I wonder, being a mum, and I don't know why I do this, but you know, it is, I become the therapist.
Yeah.
I wonder, you becoming a mum again, if that just realigned everything, going, right, I'm 50 years old, I'm a mum, I've got a new responsibility, but also I've seen part one of life and I've seen the ups and downs, and actually this is now more important because I don't need to be playing these games anymore with my life. I've got a new baby. That's all that actually matters now. I don't need to have more.
I suppose that with Etta Blue, bear in mind, she took a decade to actually conceive. So it was a very lengthy journey of IVF, failed IVF, miscarriages, etc. And that's a lot of women's stories. So it's not as if that story is unique to me. And I bless every single negative, because Etta Blue is amazing. And I wouldn't have her if all of those other things hadn't failed. And not everyone gets to tell that story, because some people don't get to go ahead and have a baby in the end. So I also acknowledge that I'm a very grateful person for her. And I have this, I suppose, transcendental belief in the fact that God knows what's right for me, and she's right for me as she is at this age. And therefore there are lessons to learn. And I also, because I'm very analytical and I'm very honest with myself, have to manage the fact that she will have 20 years less with me than my sons. And there is a grief process I have to acknowledge there. And also there is a sadness, because I'm going to miss her and I'm going to miss out on things that I ultimately won't get to see. You know, I hope that I'll see her have children, and I hope that I'll stand there at her wedding. And I ultimately know that even though I'm not going to school her in the way that I traditionally schooled my boys, so it's going to be different for her, she'll have questions about me because I'm older. And don't get me wrong, I intend to be very young until 100 years of age. And I think no one will be as surprised by death as me. I genuinely will be that person who is not expecting it, because at 105, I imagine I'll still be imagining walking in the fields and being very healthy. And I ultimately have always had that mindset about life. And I know that people lose their parents when they're children and they grow into amazing human beings, but I want to be able to see her story. And I'm ultimately going to be denied some of that because of my choices. That's my choices. And there is a selfishness of going ahead and having that baby. And there is a selflessness, because I genuinely come from a world where I was working class. We didn't have a lot growing up. I had a brilliant dad who just inspired me and told me I could be anything and do anything, but I've never expected anything. And everything to me every day, whether it's eating a nice piece of cake I've baked or whether it's having a cup of tea in the morning, I genuinely look forward to it. I'm a real person who takes bite-sized moments and makes them matter. So knowing that I have this life that I've given her, that's a selflessness. I know that people can say, well, no, because you've ultimately chosen to have her and now she has to find her way. But I'm like, and you choose not to have it. You choose not to chance life. Like, the lottery of life is such an event to actually succeed in. If you just look at the statistics of you getting to be born, genuinely, the amount of men who obviously, shall we say, ejaculate privately, and women who obviously ovulate with various eggs regularly, and yet you never connect those two. It doesn't become life because of chances not meeting and situations where that wasn't the sperm that was going to be the egg that meets, and you get it. That is miles bigger than winning the lottery live. And this idea that that isn't a gift, to me, is strange, even in situations where it's problematic and challenging. And there are people in this world who have very problematic and challenging experiences, but it's life. And ultimately, I know how lucky I am, but I also know that during the suffering, I've learned to acknowledge that that's part of the fabric. That's part of the experience, right? And it's not easy. And sometimes it makes you angry and sometimes it makes you sad. But I know when I look at her, I think she'll have all of that and I won't be there to see all of that. And fundamentally, that makes me sad. But also, fundamentally, it gives me great joy to know that she's going to be in existence, wherever that existence takes her, whatever her choices take, those choices. And that's something that, it's a duality. It's a balance, right, in the way I feel.
It's really interesting because I'm in the same headspace at the moment of feeling guilty that my parents are coming up to 60. And so if we look at 100 as the year you die, they've got 40 years left to be a grandparent. And I'm going, well, I'm still single. If I do have a relationship and I start having children, it's probably not going to be for another 5 years, which means they've got 35 years to be a grandparent, which means will they be at their grandchild's wedding? And I look at my friends and they're all having kids and they've all got grandparents who have gone to their weddings. You know, they're all like, oh, I really want my grandparents to be at that wedding. And I'm thinking, I don't know if my parents are going to be at that wedding. And I've got to deal with, and this is my personal perspective on it, and I've always wanted love. I've never had it. And this the one thing I've always missed, as well as going to EastEnders set. That's another dream. Um, there's two dreams. I've go to EastEnders set and that. And then I'm going, well, I feel guilty. I feel guilty that I can't give my parents the grandkids they want. And then having that time with them. And so that's me from a grandparent level, but you from a parent level, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I know you can't compare, but it then takes another leap because that's a parent that's even more direct than a grandparent.
Also, my child, Etta, will never have her grandfather. He's dead. And I can't give them that experience that my boys had, which was incredible. My boys have stepped in to be incredible brothers, stroke dads, because they're both very aware as well, you know. Hopefully I'll be around for a very long time. But if not, there is a job that they have to do, which is to bring her up as a really happy, well-adjusted young girl who will grow into a woman that's going to make the world proud. So I feel that as strongly as you do. And I don't think that your experience is different to mine just because I'm a parent and you're thinking about your parents, because it's that connection. But she's not going to have the active grandma that she used to have. She's not got the granddad that she would have had. Even on my husband's side, the grandfather's also dead now and grandma's lovely. But again, she recognizes her mobility isn't there. So we have got these issues and they're fundamental and honest. And there's no point avoiding them. I don't like avoiding those conversations because a lot of people will hear about me having a child at 50 and they'll say, that's incredibly selfish. And I think that that's totally okay to have that view. Does that make sense? I don't want to be one of those people who says, well, you're wrong, because that view is totally understandable. Equally, I think it's really hard to stand in the shoes of a woman who's really struggled all her life to have children and wanted a big family. And when you're given that opportunity and it works, it's just such a blessing. But it comes with questions and it comes with critics and it also comes with an empathy for all of those different perspectives. And I want to have that because that makes me a better human being, because Etta Blue will have some questions as she gets older. And I have to be prepared. And those criticisms that I hear, they help to prepare me for potentially some of those challenging conversations. And so everybody's perspective is helpful to me. When it comes down to you and your own kids, you know, your parents will not want any other grandchildren than the grandchildren that you give them. And you won't want any other children than the children you're blessed with, because they will be the people that you were meant to be destined with, and they'll be your tribe. And how old are you now?
31.
31. So
don't make it sound like that's so young.
It's beautiful. I think the 30s are the best decade ever, but 31 and you're worried about how your parents will cope with only having your children potentially for 35 years, shall we say. Well, that's a whole of your lifetime again. And I bet you've been through a lot of journeys and a lot of different traveling within your own psyche and their experience with you. So they'll be blessed with that. I mean, that's beautiful, isn't it? And like I said, I don't want to minimize as well the fact that people lose the parents at the age of 2 and 3. And one of my closest friends lost her mum at 6. And this is the reality of life. Nothing's promised. And so people like me who are managing the guilt of having a baby later in life and genuinely feel like they're still 25, because I do. I mean, I'm really lucky in the fact that I do feel really healthy and young and vital. At the end of the day, those conversations that they're having and that we're having, we have to have them openly and broadly, because women more and more are realizing in their 40s that they've left it a long time to have kids, and then have all of this societal guilt placed on them for wanting kids. And people like me are saying, yes, naturally, it's quite hard, let's be honest, in your late 40s to have babies. But there are all these interventions, if you're lucky enough to be able to use them, that give you options. And yes, there's going to be this weight of conversation on you saying you shouldn't, it's not natural, all of the things that it's okay to have conversations about. But if you have that feeling in your 40s and in your early 50s, and you have the opportunity, then to deny yourself something that is truly beautiful. I mean, it's just beautiful having children at any age. I think that that would be sad. And that's why we have to acknowledge the critics, understand their position, but also know that something internally within you on a cerebral and visceral complex experience is telling you this is right for me. And so even though you're a young man now, and you might take 5 years mating your young woman, when you have your babies, no matter what age that is, it will just be the most transformative, beautiful experience. And again, you said earlier on about how's that affected my life now, it hasn't made it small, and my life's always been small. So I have a really small life. I don't go to big parties. I don't get on guest lists for things. I know the same people that I've always known. and have been blessed to meet people along the way. But usually it's the relationships that you've always had that stick. And I've never lived anywhere different to where I live, you know, apart from when I lived abroad when I was younger. My life has stayed really small. Etta's come into it and she's expanded it, because now I think about a new peer group when I meet people at activities, when she's going to go and do dancing or gymnastics or whatever. And I've learned in my earlier years to not take it for granted, because I did. When I took my boys to school, met loads of new women my age, I genuinely just thought it would never end. And then they go to high school and you never see any of them again because you didn't cultivate it in the way that you should. So I'm gifted with this insight and knowledge, and I'm definitely going to do things a little bit differently. She won't go to mainstream school, etc., but she will go to lots of activities. So there is a part of me, a core part of me, that feels like I've got this second chance at really appreciating and feeling that sense of gratitude for things that I just took for granted. Because when you're younger, rightfully, everything feels like there is possibilities of tomorrow, everything. When you're older, you realize, actually, sometimes I just accepted things on a day-to-day basis and thought they'd always be there. That's the same with relationships. And then one day they weren't. So now I'm really going to hold on to the things that have meaning, that I have eyes for, that other people of a different age won't have eyes for yet. And that's an age thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, look, this is why I set up Good in School with your help, is that we're having the conversations that aren't being had. And so, yes, we can look at grief and what we're grieving of, but we never have that conversation of what we could be grieving. And it's interesting that, you know, we see these deadlines and then we go, we're going to grieve on the past, but actually we can grieve on the future. And I think that's also really important. But the way to do that is to have the time to do it. And if you have the time to do it, it's because you're not cooking and you're not cleaning. And regardless of all the different appliances you have, there's time to have to yourself. Whether you're putting the kettle on, you can just take a moment to have that thing and to think about, what am I grieving for the future as well as the past? And so coming up with AO, you've been working with them to talk about their new research. I know, that was seamless. It's almost like I was listening to you on LBC back in the day, trying to make seamless links between the breaks. Talk to me about your research of AO and what you've been getting up to.
So, well, AO have created the Appliance Appreciation Society, which I'm a firm member of. I am a little bit obsessed. People won't know this about me. I'm a little bit obsessed with baking. I'm a little bit obsessed with my appliances. I'm not going to lie. I am the person that if you come to my house, I will make you a very nice latte. I'll have had nothing to do with it, but my machine will have presented you with a frothy, delicious cup. Same when it comes down to my mixer. You might think that my cakes are delightful and fluffy, but of course, I haven't actually mixed them myself. I've just thrown it all into one space. And genuinely, as a mum and a working mum, and I am really busy and I do work a lot of hours a week, shall we say, the truth is anything that saves me time is really imperative to my life. But my argument with human beings across the board is that we don't acknowledge the mini miracles. We really don't. So if you think about every single day, you get up in the morning, you probably pop your kettle on, have your cup of tea or your coffee, get your milk from your fridge. You're not processing, wow, how blessed am I to have all of these options available to me? And I've been through every economic trend there is, you know, from having no money to having some money, right? So I know there's a difference, but I've always had my kettle and I've always had my cup of tea. And to acknowledge the fact that we have those privileges is sometimes something that it's easy to forget because, like I said, we just go through the motions. So AO are helping us to figure out that reality in our life, to take that step to just think to ourselves, you know what, when I make myself that cup of tea or when I put my tea on and put it in the oven, instead of just thinking this is life, be like, how would life be without this? Because the thing about practicing gratitude, so whenever I've worked in therapeutic work with people, one of the things that I talk about is gratitude. And I fear in life at the moment, people think that's trite. People think it's a little bit shallow. Oh, be grateful for, what about the state of the world? And right, okay, listen, you're going to have a horrible mental health if that's the way you think about the world. If all you're going to do is look at the bleak, the treacherous, the disastrous, then that's how you're going to feel. You have to manage those feelings. You can look at all the terrible things in the world and you can seek to change them in your own way. But if all you do is concentrate on that, you will not be that much use to anybody because you will not find any joy or peace. You have to find the pockets where you can zone out and zone into the things that have meaning in your world that are affecting you directly. So for me, when we're talking about appreciating things like your toaster, when you actually think about that on a micro scale, it can make you go, well, why would I appreciate my toaster? And then on a macro scale, it's like, well, why wouldn't you? Because you've just been able to eat some food from that took moments to create and actually was delicious. And that was your pocket of space for today, where you got to just think about things that are good in your world. So mini miracles, practicing gratitude throughout my work with people has always been key. And I mean practicing gratitude when it's bad as well. It's practicing gratitude when things aren't great, like you're still breathing, the trees are still beautiful, the sun is still shining at times, the sound of the rain on the rooftop makes you feel relaxed. Those things matter. So the reason that this is really something I love is, one, I am a bit obsessed with my appliances. If you could see my kitchen, you'd know why. But secondly, they're just reminding us, come on, it's really key to remind yourself every single day that you have things that you can appreciate, because gratitude makes you feel more content. It makes you feel less frustrated. It means that you soothe some of the anxieties that you've got. And like I said, even in the bleakest of moments, making that cup of tea for a friend who's just lost somebody they love, that really has an impact. So go ahead and do those things. And the research said that 51% of people cannot survive even a day without what they love in their kitchen.
My absolute thanks to Emma Kenny. I absolutely love her. She comes on year after year. She is the reason we have Sick and Good. She told me to make a podcast 6.5 years ago. She then told me to join YouTube last year. And it's all because of her that you get to watch or listen to these episodes. Now, if you want to support Emma, she's on tour. Her True Crime Tour is continuing to tour around the UK. Go and check it out on her website. And also she's on Patreon, where she has behind the scenes exclusive to you, patreon.com/Emma Kenny TV if you want to support her. And look, this is what we do on Skin and Scale. We have those conversations that are not being had anywhere else. I tell you it's okay to not be okay every week. But what I haven't said to you is it's okay to not be okay even when you're grieving about your future. It's absolutely fine to grieve about your future. Yes, there's no physical evidence like there is if you're grieving about your past. However, what there is your head. And in your head, you can be paranoid. You can manifest things. You can overthink things. You can imagine things. You can catastrophize things. That's okay. And you can grieve for those moments, and you can analyze those moments, and you can think about this. And that's exactly what Emma told you on today's episode. So if you enjoyed Sick and Good today on YouTube, give a thumbs up rating. Then leave a comment and a review. You've been doing it for Emma Kenny for the past year since she was last on last August. Let's continue that conversation. So thumbs up rating, subscribe button, comment. Wherever you're listening, on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, wherever you're listening, leave a 5-star rating, leave a review, and click that subscribe button. Let's keep spreading the word it's okay to not be okay. And on social media, on TikTok, at Johnny Seifert 92 is where I put all the clips. At Skin and Good Podcast, at Johnny Seifert is where you can find me on Instagram. And on X, at Johnny Seifert is where you can find me. Let's keep having those conversations. Now, I also want to thank AO, and I want to thank Havas Red and Tilly Davis and her team there for setting up this interview. I can't thank you enough. Absolutely beautiful conversation. And AO, what they're saying about appliances, even that's just got me thinking how I've got a second to make a coffee or a piece of toast, and how I can think about my mental health in those times. So, massive thanks to everyone for watching, for listening, for getting involved in this episode, and I will speak to you very soon. I'm Johnny Seifert. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.